The massive Corvani warship Dominion's Edge hung in space like a predator studying its prey. Admiral Zethka stood on the command bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the small blue planet rotate slowly on the main screen. Earth. Such an insignificant world, yet it had sent ripples of concern throughout the Galactic Council. "Admiral?" Communications Officer Venta spoke, her voice carrying the melodic tones of her species. "We're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet's surface. They're requesting to speak with us." Zethka's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. Requesting? How quaint. These humans still believe they have a choice in the matter. The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Every crew member knew why they were here. 3 months ago, Earth had done the unthinkable. They had refused to surrender their military forces to the Galactic Peace Accord. Every civilized species in the galaxy had long ago given up their weapons of war, trusting in the Council's protection, but not Earth. "Sir," Tactical Officer Morven reported, his scaled hands dancing across holographic displays. "Our scans show significant military installations across the planet's surface. Their technology appears primitive, but numerous." "Primitive," Zethka repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, we've read the reports. Chemical propellants, crude ballistics, nuclear fission. Technology our ancestors abandoned millennia ago." His eyes gleamed with anticipation. "This will be educational for the crew. Show them what real warfare looks like before we end this charade." The Corvani had earned their reputation as the galaxy's finest warriors through conquest of over 200 worlds. Their military academies were legendary, their battle doctrine studied by every species in the Council. They had never faced defeat. "Admiral," Venta called out again, her voice uncertain. "The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're warning us to leave." The bridge erupted in clicking sounds, Corvani laughter. Even the junior officers joined in. The idea of this backward species threatening them was beyond amusing. "Put them through," Zethka commanded, settling into his command throne. "Let's hear what these primitives have to say." The main screen flickered and displayed a human male in military uniform. His face was weathered, scarred, and his eyes held a strange quality that Zethka couldn't quite identify. The human wore insignia that their intelligence suggested indicated high rank. "This is General Marcus Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, his voice calm despite the circumstances. "You have entered our solar system without permission and ignored our attempts at peaceful contact. I am authorized to inform you that if you do not withdraw immediately, we will consider your presence an act of war." The bridge fell silent. Then, Zethka began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the ship. "General Chen," he said, standing to his full 3-meter height, "I am Admiral Zethka of the Corvani Imperial Fleet. You speak of war as if you understand what it means. Your species has been observed. Your conflicts are small, localized affairs using weapons that wouldn't penetrate our ship's navigation shields." He gestured to the tactical display showing their overwhelming advantage. "We have 150 vessels in this fleet. Each could level your largest cities within minutes. Surrender now, and your species will be relocated to appropriate worlds where you can live peacefully under Council oversight." The human's expression didn't change. That strange quality in his eyes seemed to intensify. "Admiral," General Chen said quietly, "you've made a fundamental error in your assessment." "And what might that be?" "You think we don't know what war is." The general leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, my species has been at war for over 5,000 years. We've never stopped fighting. Every generation has known combat. Every child grows up hearing stories of battles fought by their ancestors." Zethka's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Primitive conflicts between scattered tribes hardly constitute. We've had 2 world wars that killed hundreds of millions. We've fought in jungles, deserts, frozen mountains, and city streets. We've battled in trenches filled with poison gas in burning buildings and in underground tunnels. We've fought with swords, muskets, machine guns, and nuclear weapons." The general's voice remained steady, almost conversational. We've never surrendered to anyone, Admiral. Not to famine, not to plague, not to natural disasters, and certainly not to aliens who think they understand war better than we do. The bridge had grown completely silent. Something in the human's tone was beginning to make even the veteran Corvani officers uncomfortable. You have 24 hours to withdraw, General Chen concluded. After that, we'll show you what human warfare really looks like. The transmission ended. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Zethka's laughter boomed across the bridge. "Did you hear that?" he asked his officers. "They're going to show us what warfare looks like." He wiped moisture from his eyes. "Begin the assault. I want this finished quickly. These humans need to learn their place in the galaxy." But as the crew moved to execute his orders, Zethka found himself staring at the blank screen where the human general's face had been. Those eyes. There had been something in them he'd never seen before. Not fear, not anger, but something else. Something that made his tactical instincts whisper warnings he chose to ignore. The Dominion's Edge began its descent toward Earth, leading the vast Corvani fleet like a spear thrust toward the heart of humanity's defiance. What Admiral Zethka didn't know was that every military installation on Earth had been receiving updates for the past 3 hours. Satellite networks had been tracking the alien fleet since they'd entered the solar system. Deep beneath mountains, in underground bunkers, and in hidden facilities around the globe, humanity's true military might was awakening. The veterans were coming home. Chapter 2. First contact. 12 hours after the ultimatum, the first Corvani assault ships descended through Earth's atmosphere. Admiral Zethka watched from his command ship as 48 sleek fighters began their approach to what intelligence had identified as Earth's primary military command center, a complex called the Pentagon in the North American continent. "This should be over quickly," he told his staff. "Our fighters carry plasma weapons that can melt through any known armor. Their crude missiles cannot match our ship's speed or maneuverability." The assault began exactly as Corvani doctrine dictated. The fighters approached in perfect formation, energy weapons charging, prepared to eliminate the command structure with precision strikes. It was a textbook operation that had worked flawlessly on dozens of worlds. Then everything went wrong. The first indication of trouble came from Flight Leader Cax-9. "Command, I'm reading multiple incoming projectiles. Speed and trajectory suggest this can't be right." "What are you seeing, Cax-9?" "Sir, these projectiles are traveling at impossible velocities. Our sensors indicate they're simple metal rods, but they're moving at significant fractions of light speed." Admiral Zethka frowned. "Impossible. Our intelligence shows these humans lack even basic energy projection technology." "Sir," Cax-9's voice carried a note of panic that no Corvani officer should ever display. "Impact in 3 seconds, I can't. Fate." The transmission cut to static. On the main screen, Zethka watched in stunned silence as one of his fighters simply disappeared. No explosion, no wreckage. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, replaced by a brief flash of superheated plasma. "What happened?" he demanded. Tactical Officer Morven's hands flew across his instruments. "Sir, the projectile was fired from the planet's surface. It appears to be a simple tungsten rod, but it was accelerated using some form of electromagnetic propulsion system. The kinetic energy alone was sufficient to completely vaporize our fighter." "One lucky shot," Zethka muttered, but his confidence was shaking. "Continue the assault." The remaining fighters pressed forward, but more projectiles began launching from hidden positions across the planet. These weren't random shots. They were precisely calculated, leading the fighters' flight paths with mathematical precision. Within minutes, 16 more fighters had been destroyed. The survivors were forced to retreat to higher altitudes, their attack completely disrupted. "Sir," Communications Officer Venta reported, her voice trembling, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet." The screen lit up again, showing General Chen. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood dozens of humans in military uniforms from various nations. Their faces showed a mixture of ages and ethnicities. But they all shared something that made Zethka's blood run cold, the same look in their eyes that he'd noticed in the general. "Admiral Zethka," General Chen said, his voice still calm. "I hope you're beginning to understand your mistake. The weapons you just encountered were designed by species that have been perfecting the art of killing for millennia. Those were our defensive systems. You haven't seen our offensive capabilities yet." Behind the general, an elderly human woman stepped forward. Her uniform bore different insignia, and her white hair was pulled back severely. "Admiral," she said in accented English, "allow me to introduce myself. Colonel Yuki Tanaka, formerly of the Japanese Self-Defense Forces. I am 93 years old. Do you know what that means?" Zethka remained silent, but his tactical officers were frantically trying to process what they were seeing. 93 years was ancient for most species, well beyond combat age. "It means," Colonel Tanaka continued, "that I was born during what we call World War II. My grandfather fought in the Russo-Japanese War. My father survived the Pacific Campaign. I have literally never known a world at peace. None of us have." Another human stepped forward, a young man who couldn't have been more than 25 Earth years old. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez, United States Army Rangers," he introduced himself. 7 deployments to active combat zones. I've been fighting since I was 18. My father fought in Iraq, his father fought in Vietnam, his father fought in Korea. Every generation of my family has gone to war, Admiral. We don't know how to do anything else." More humans stepped forward, each introducing themselves, each with their own history of conflict. Zethka realized with growing horror that these weren't just military leaders. They were representatives of an entire species that had never stopped fighting. "Admiral," General Chen said, regaining control of the conversation, "you've studied our technology, our numbers, our industrial capacity. But you've made a critical error. You've studied our tools, not our nature. We don't just fight with weapons, Admiral. We fight with everything we have, everything we are, and everything we can become." The general paused, letting his words sink in. "Your species has had peace for so long that you've forgotten what desperation looks like. You've forgotten what it means to fight for survival, to adapt, to innovate under pressure. You practice war in simulations and academies. We live it, breathe it, and have been perfecting it for thousands of years." Behind him, the assembled humans began to smile. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "You want to see what human warfare looks like?" General Chen asked. "You're about to get a demonstration. But first, let me tell you about some of our veterans, the people you're really fighting." The screen changed to show images of humans in various military uniforms throughout their history. "Staff Sergeant Murphy over there," the general pointed to a scarred man in the background. "Survived 3 tours in Afghanistan. He spent 2 years fighting an enemy that used improvised explosives, guerrilla tactics, and terrain that would kill most species. He learned to find threats in everything: children, buildings, vehicles, even the ground beneath his feet." The image shifted to show another human. Captain Petrov fought in urban warfare in Eastern Europe, house-to-house combat for months. He learned to fight in sewers, in basements, in rubble that used to be cities. He can kill with a paperclip if necessary. More images flashed by. Commander Hassan served on nuclear submarines. She spent years underwater, in a metal tube, surrounded by weapons that could end civilizations. She knows machinery, pressure, and how to remain calm when death is inches away. The general's voice grew quieter, more intense. "We have veterans from every conflict our species has ever fought, Admiral. Desert warfare specialists, jungle fighters, mountain troops, naval commanders, pilots who've engaged in aerial combat, submariners, tank crews, infantry who fought in trenches. We have humans who've survived chemical weapons, biological warfare, nuclear attacks, and conflicts that lasted for decades." The camera panned across more faces, each bearing the unmistakable marks of combat experience. "Every one of them volunteered to be here, Admiral. Every one of them has children, grandchildren, people they love on this planet. And every one of them knows exactly what you represent. Another enemy trying to take away their freedom." General Chen stepped closer to the camera, So let me ask you again, Admiral. Are you sure you want to show us what warfare looks like? The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Dominion's edge, the silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Tactical Officer Morven spoke. Sir, our remaining fighters are requesting permission to return to their ships. They report that the humans are launching more projectiles. They also indicate that new weapon systems are coming online across the planet's surface. Admiral Zethka stared at the blue planet turning slowly below them. For the first time in his military career, doubt crept into his thoughts. Sir? Morven prompted. Zethka straightened in his command chair. We are Corvani, he declared. We have conquered 200 worlds. We will not be intimidated by primitive mammals regardless of their boasts. But even as he gave the order to continue the assault, something cold had settled in his stomach. Those human faces, those eyes, they looked like they were actually looking forward to the fight. That couldn't be right. No civilized species looked forward to warfare. Could it? Chapter 3. The storm breaks. The second wave of the Corvani assault began 18 hours later. Admiral Zethka had spent those hours studying every piece of intelligence the Council had gathered about human military capabilities. What he found both confused and concerned him. The humans had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light communication systems. Their most advanced fighters were barely capable of breaking their own planet's gravity well. By every measure of military technology, they should have surrendered the moment his fleet appeared. Yet they had destroyed 27 of his fighters with weapons that were, according to all logic, impossible to create with their primitive technology. Admiral, Science Officer Telna reported, I've completed my analysis of the human weapon systems. They appear to be using magnetic acceleration chambers to launch solid projectiles at extreme velocities. The technology is crude, but effective. Crude? Zethka questioned. Yes, sir. Instead of developing sophisticated energy projection systems, they've simply found ways to make simple projectiles move faster than any defensive system can track or intercept. It's inelegant, but devastatingly practical. Zethka considered this. In all his studies of warfare, he'd learned that the most dangerous enemies were often not the most technologically advanced, but the most unpredictable. The humans were certainly that. Begin the second assault, he ordered. This time, we use overwhelming force. I want every fighter, every gunship, every assault craft in the air simultaneously. They cannot possibly target all of our ships at once. The assault began with 200 Corvani spacecraft descending through Earth's atmosphere from multiple directions. It was a coordinated attack that should have overwhelmed any planetary defense system. The humans had been waiting for exactly this move. The first surprise came from orbit. Hidden among Earth's massive collection of satellites were platforms that had been disguised as communication relays and weather monitoring stations. When the Corvani fleet committed to their atmospheric approach, these platforms revealed their true nature. Sir, Tactical Officer Morven shouted. Multiple energy signatures from orbit. The humans have weapons platforms hidden in their satellite network. Zethka watched in amazement as dozens of what he'd assumed were primitive satellites began firing laser weapons with surgical precision. These weren't the crude chemical rockets intelligence had led him to expect. These were focused energy, beams that could cut through Corvani hull armor. How did our intelligence miss this? He demanded. Sir, the platforms appear to have been constructed to look like standard communication satellites. They only revealed their weapon systems when they began firing. More alarms began sounding as the second surprise revealed itself. The humans weren't just defending from fixed positions, they were mobile. Aircraft that had been hidden in underground hangars, mobile missile launchers that had been disguised as civilian vehicles, and weapon systems that emerged from what appeared to be ordinary buildings were all coming online simultaneously. But the third surprise was the most devastating of all. Admiral! Communications Officer Venta called out in panic. We're receiving transmissions from our assault craft. They're reporting that the humans they're using our own tactics against us. On the main screen, the feed from one of their gunships showed something that should have been impossible. Human fighters were engaging in aerial combat using methods that mirrored advanced Corvani tactics, formations, maneuvers, and strategies that took years to master. "That's impossible," Zethka stated flatly. "Those maneuvers require training." "Sir," the pilot's voice crackled through the communication system. "These humans aren't flying like primitives. They know exactly what they're doing. They're anticipating our moves, countering our formations, and... Sir, I think they've been studying us for much longer than we realized." The awful truth began to dawn on Admiral Zethka. The humans hadn't just been preparing for this attack. They'd been preparing for specifically this attack by specifically the Corvani, using specifically these tactics. "How long have they been watching us?" he whispered. As if in answer to his question, General Chen's face appeared on the screen again. This time, the human was standing in what appeared to be a command center, with dozens of screens showing the aerial battle taking place above his planet. "Admiral Zethka," the general said, "I think it's time for some honesty. We've been monitoring your fleet's communications since you entered our solar system. We've also been studying Corvani military doctrine for the past 6 months." Zethka's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. Our communications are encrypted with algorithms that we broke 3 days after you began using them," General Chen interrupted. "Admiral, one thing you need to understand about humans is that we're exceptionally good at solving puzzles, especially when our survival depends on it. We've been listening to your tactical discussions, your strategy sessions, and your intelligence briefings." The general gestured to the screens around him. "We know that Corvani doctrine favors overwhelming force delivered through coordinated atmospheric assault. We know that you prefer to establish air superiority before moving to ground operations. We know that your pilots are trained in academies that emphasize formation flying and by-the-book tactics." Behind the general, an elderly human man stepped into view. His uniform bore insignia that even Zethka recognized, the markings of a supreme military commander. "Admiral," the elderly man said, "allow me to introduce myself. Fleet Admiral Chen Wu, formerly of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. I spent 40 years studying military doctrine, including extensive analysis of every major spacefaring species in the galaxy. When we learned that first contact might not be peaceful, we began preparing." The old admiral's eyes held the same unsettling quality that Zethka had noticed in all the humans. "We've been playing your own war games, Admiral. We built simulators that replicated Corvani ships and tactics. We trained our pilots to fight exactly the way you fight. We've been preparing for this specific battle for months." General Chen took control again. "But Admiral, that's not even our most significant advantage. Would you like to know what is?" Zethka found himself unable to speak. Around him, his bridge crew was frantically trying to coordinate the failing assault, but his attention was focused entirely on the human commander. "Our most significant advantage," General Chen continued, "is that while you've been practicing war, we've been living it. Every day for thousands of years, humans have been finding new ways to kill each other and survive being killed. We've fought in every environment against every kind of enemy, using every weapon imaginable." The general's expression grew deadly serious. "You want to know what makes us different, Admiral? We don't just study warfare in academies. We don't just run simulations. We don't just follow doctrine. We improvise, we adapt. We learn from every mistake, every defeat, every casualty. And we never, ever give up." On the tactical display, Zethka could see that his assault was failing. Human fighters were systematically destroying his craft using tactics that combined their own innovations with captured Corvani strategies. Worse, they were adapting in real time, changing their approach every time his pilots found a counter-strategy. "Admiral," General Chen's voice softened slightly, "I'm going to give you one more chance. Withdraw your fleet, leave our system. Find another way to solve whatever problem brought you here, because if you continue this assault, you're going to discover just how creative humans can be when it comes to warfare." The transmission ended, leaving Zethka staring at a tactical display that showed the systematic destruction of his assault force. In less than 2 hours, the humans had shot down over 60 Corvani craft while losing only a handful of their own fighters. "Sir," Morven reported quietly, The assault has failed. Our remaining craft are requesting permission to withdraw. Around the bridge, every officer was staring at their commander, waiting for orders. For the first time in his career, Admiral Zethka didn't know what those orders should be. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had taken a technologically superior force and defeated it using nothing but superior tactics, intelligence, and an understanding of warfare that seemed to come from their very bones. "Sir?" Morven prompted again. Zethka straightened in his command chair. He was Corvani. He had never been defeated. He would not start now. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. If we cannot take this planet by conventional assault, we'll simply destroy it from space." But even as he gave the order, Admiral Zethka couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a terrible mistake. The humans had surprised him twice already. What else were they hiding? He was about to find out. Chapter 4. The price of underestimation. Admiral Zethka's order to begin orbital bombardment marked the beginning of the most devastating miscalculation in Corvani military history. As his fleet moved into position above Earth's major population centers, he believed he was finally implementing a strategy that would end the conflict swiftly. The Corvani had used orbital bombardment to pacify dozens of worlds. It was a simple, effective tactic that bypassed planetary defenses entirely. No species had ever found a way to counter it. But then, no species had ever been quite like humanity. "Admiral," Tactical Officer Morven reported, "all ships are in position. We have target locks on major military installations and population centers across the planet." "Excellent," Zethka replied, settling back in his command chair. "Begin bombardment. I want those weapon installations destroyed first. Then we'll address the population centers." The first salvo of plasma bombardment lanced down from the Corvani fleet toward Earth's surface. The energy beams were powerful enough to level city blocks, and they struck with the precision that had terrorized countless worlds. But instead of the massive explosions they expected, something impossible happened. The plasma beams simply disappeared. "Sir," Morven's voice carried a note of confusion that bordered on panic. "Our bombardment appears to have been intercepted." "Intercepted?" Zethka demanded. "That's impossible. You cannot intercept orbital plasma bombardment with chemical rockets." "Sir, they're not using rockets. Our sensors are detecting some form of energy projection system. It appears to be neutralizing our plasma beams." On the main screen, Earth rotated peacefully below them, completely unharmed by what should have been a devastating attack. Around the planet, however, new contacts were appearing on the sensor grid. "Sir," Science Officer Telna reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "I'm reading multiple artificial structures in orbit around the planet. They weren't there an hour ago." Zethka stared at the tactical display as dozens of new contacts appeared. They seemed to be emerging from the planet's moon, from hidden positions behind orbital debris, and from locations that his sensors had dismissed as asteroid fragments. "Those are weapons platforms," he realized with growing horror. "How many?" "Sir, I'm counting over 300 separate installations. They appear to be equipped with energy projection systems capable of intercepting our bombardment." The communications officer suddenly looked up from her console. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the planet." This time, the screen showed General Chen standing in what appeared to be a massive underground facility. Behind him, dozens of humans in military uniforms worked at advanced computer systems that seemed far more sophisticated than anything in the Corvani intelligence. "Reports. Admiral Zethka," General Chen said, his voice carrying an edge of steel that hadn't been there before. "Did you really think we'd be foolish enough to put our only defenses on the planet's surface?" The general gestured to the activity behind him. "What you're seeing now is the result of 70 years of human engineering, driven by a very simple philosophy: never again. We've been preparing for orbital bombardment since the day we developed nuclear weapons and realized what it meant to have enemies who could attack from space." A new figure stepped into view, a woman wearing the uniform of what appeared to be a space service. "Admiral," she said, Commander Sarah Mitchell, United Earth Space Defense Force. Those weapon platforms you're looking at? We've been building them for decades, hidden in locations throughout our solar system. Some were constructed inside asteroids, others were built in the shadow of our moon, and a few were assembled in the outer system and moved into position using trajectories that avoided your sensor sweeps. General Chen stepped forward again. Admiral, you've made the same mistake that every aggressor in human history has made. You assumed that because we appeared weak, we actually were weak. You saw our surface defenses and assumed that was all we had. The screen changed to show a tactical overview of Earth's solar system. Zethka watched in growing horror as hundreds of weapon platforms, hidden bases, and defensive installations appeared on the display. The humans hadn't just been preparing for this attack. They'd been preparing for a war that could span their entire solar system. We've had this conversation before in our history, General Chen continued. Would you like to know what happened to the last group that underestimated human determination and ingenuity? The screen showed historical images that Zethka didn't recognize, scenes of massive industrial complexes, weapons production facilities, and military formations that seemed to span entire continents. During our Second World War, the United States was attacked by a technologically superior enemy. They destroyed our naval base at Pearl Harbor and believed they had crippled our ability to fight back. What they discovered was that attacking America didn't destroy our industrial capacity. It unleashed it. The images changed to show massive shipyards, aircraft factories, and production lines that seemed to stretch for kilometers. Within 4 years, we had built the largest navy in human history, developed nuclear weapons, and completely reversed the strategic balance of power. We didn't just survive the attack, Admiral. We used it as motivation to become stronger than our enemies had ever imagined possible. General Chen's expression grew deadly serious. You've just made the same mistake. You've shown us that we're not alone in the universe, and that there are species out there who will attack us simply because we refuse to surrender our freedom. Congratulations, Admiral. You've just guaranteed that humanity will become a spacefaring military power. Behind the general, more humans appeared on screen. Unlike the previous group, these weren't just military officers. They wore the uniforms of scientists, engineers, and technical specialists. Dr. Elizabeth Hawking, formerly of NASA, one of them introduced herself. We've been studying your technology ever since you entered our solar system. Your ships, your weapons, your energy systems. We've been analyzing everything and finding ways to replicate it with our own technology base. Another scientist stepped forward. Professor Liu Wei, formerly of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Admiral, would you like to know what we discovered about your plasma bombardment systems? Zethka found himself nodding despite his better judgment. They're actually quite elegant, Professor Liu continued. But they have a fatal flaw. They require a specific energy frequency to maintain cohesion during atmospheric entry. Once we identified that frequency, it was relatively simple to develop countermeasures. Dr. Hawking smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both friendly and terrifying. The beautiful thing about human scientific advancement, Admiral, is that we don't just study peacefully in laboratories. We have a long history of rapid innovation during wartime. Some of our greatest technological breakthroughs came from military necessity. The screen changed again, showing industrial facilities that were clearly not on Earth's surface. Those are our lunar manufacturing centers, General Chen explained. We've been industrializing our moon for the past 30 years. Those asteroid mining operations you can see in the outer system, they've been feeding raw materials to hidden construction facilities throughout our solar system. Zethka's tactical instincts finally began to grasp the scope of what he was facing. How long? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. How long have we been preparing? General Chen repeated. Admiral, we've been preparing for this war since the day we first looked up at the stars and wondered what else might be out there. We've been building, planning, and preparing for the possibility that first contact might not be peaceful. The general's expression softened slightly. But we're not unreasonable, Admiral. We don't want this war. We never wanted this war. All we wanted was to be left alone to develop at our own pace. You could have approached us peacefully. You could have offered trade, cultural exchange, or simply coexistence. His voice hardened again. Instead, you came here with a fleet of warships and gave us an ultimatum. You threatened our families, our homes, and our freedom. You made this war inevitable. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zeth Ka staring at a tactical display that now showed the true scope of human defensive capabilities. Hundreds of weapon platforms, dozens of hidden bases, and manufacturing facilities that could support a war effort larger than anything the Corvani had ever encountered. Sir, Communications Officer Venta reported quietly. We're receiving reports from the fleet. Several ships are reporting systems failures. It appears the humans are using some form of electronic warfare against us. Sir, Tactical Officer Morven added, our bombardment has been completely neutralized. The human defense platforms are not only intercepting our weapons, they're analyzing them. Each successive salvo is being countered more effectively than the last. Admiral Zeth Ka stood slowly, his forearms hanging at his sides as he stared at the blue planet that had just revealed itself to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Sir, Morven said quietly, what are your orders? For the first time in his military career, Admiral Zeth Ka didn't have an answer. Every tactical doctrine he'd ever learned, every strategy he'd ever studied, every victory he'd ever achieved, none of it had prepared him for an enemy like this. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were turning this invasion into a learning experience, studying Corvani technology and tactics while simultaneously developing countermeasures. They were treating this war as an opportunity to advance their own military capabilities, and they were winning. Epilogue: The New Reality. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, Admiral Zeth Ka stood before the Galactic Council, delivering a report that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Honored counselors, he began, his voice carrying none of the confidence that had once marked his speeches. I must report that the subjugation of Earth has failed. The human species has successfully resisted our forces and has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Corvani had never failed to conquer a target world. Counselor Prime Yith Ka, eldest of the assembled species, raised a tentacle for silence. Admiral, explain how a technologically primitive species could defeat the Corvani Imperial fleet. Zeth Ka activated his holographic display, showing images of the battle that still haunted his dreams. Honored counselors, our intelligence was fundamentally flawed. We assessed human military capability based on their technology, not their methodology. We failed to understand that humans don't just practice warfare, they live it, breathe it, and have been perfecting it for their entire evolutionary history. The display showed footage of human fighters engaging Corvani ships with tactics that seemed to anticipate every Corvani move. They studied us, counselors. While we were planning our invasion, they were learning our doctrine, breaking our communications, and developing countermeasures to our weapons. They turned our own tactical superiority against us. Counselor Vethna of the Ethereal Collective spoke next. Admiral, surely their technological limitations prevented them from mounting an effective defense against orbital bombardment. Zeth Ka's mandibles clicked in what his people recognized as bitter laughter. Honored counselor, the humans have been preparing for orbital bombardment since they developed spaceflight. They've constructed the most comprehensive planetary defense system in the galaxy, hidden throughout their solar system in locations we never thought to examine. The display changed to show the scope of human military preparation, hidden bases, weapon platforms, and manufacturing facilities that span their entire star system. They've industrialized their moon, established mining operations throughout their asteroid belt, and constructed defensive installations that we still haven't completely cataloged. All of this was done while maintaining the appearance of a primitive, divided species. Counselor Prime Yithka's voice carried a note of concern that resonated through the chamber. Admiral, what is the current status of human military development? Zeth Ka's expression grew grave. Honored counselors, that is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this entire situation. The humans are not content to simply defend their world. They are expanding. The holographic display shifted to show recent intelligence gathered by long-range scouts. Massive construction projects were visible throughout the human solar system: shipyards, weapon platforms, and what appeared to be faster-than-light drive research facilities. In the 6 months since our withdrawal, the humans have accelerated their technological development at an unprecedented rate. They've reverse-engineered our plasma weapons, improved upon our shield technology, and are currently developing their own faster-than-light propulsion systems. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Every species present understood the implications of humans achieving interstellar travel capability. Furthermore, Zethka continued, they have established contact with several neutral species on the galactic rim. They are offering technology exchanges, mutual defense pacts, and what they call cultural exchange programs. They are building alliances, counselors. Counselor Morta of the Silicon Confederation spoke up. Admiral, surely their expansion efforts are limited by their primitive industrial base? Zethka's laugh held no humor. Honored counselor, the humans don't have an industrial base, they have an industrial empire. Their manufacturing capacity now exceeds that of most council species. They've automated their production systems, established mining operations throughout their solar system, and are currently constructing what their communications refer to as generation ships. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Generation ships were vessels capable of supporting populations for interstellar journeys lasting centuries. Any species willing to build such vessels was preparing for expansion on a galactic scale. Counselors, Zethka said quietly, we have created exactly what the Galactic Peace Accord was designed to prevent. We have forced a militaristic species to develop interstellar capabilities while maintaining their warrior culture. Counselor Prime Yithka's tentacles writhed with agitation. What do you recommend, Admiral? Honored counselors, I recommend immediate diplomatic contact with the human government. Not to demand their surrender, but to negotiate a peace treaty before they achieve full interstellar capability. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The Galactic Council had never negotiated with a species that refused to surrender their military forces. Admiral, Counselor Vethna objected, such an action would set a dangerous precedent. If we negotiate with the humans, other species might refuse to comply with the peace accord. Zethka's 4 eyes focused on the ethereal being with an intensity that made several counselors uncomfortable. Honored counselor, with respect, that precedent has already been set. The humans have proven that the peace accord can be resisted. Worse, they've proven that resistance can be successful. Every species in the galaxy is now aware that the Corvani Imperial fleet can be defeated. He gestured to his display, which now showed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. We're already receiving reports of increased military activity among species that were previously compliant. The Centauri have reactivated their mothballed fleet. The Vegan Collective has resumed weapons research. Even some of the core worlds are quietly expanding their defense capabilities. The terrible truth of the situation began to dawn on the assembled counselors. The human victory hadn't just prevented one planet's subjugation, it had undermined the entire structure of galactic peace. Furthermore, Zethka continued relentlessly, the humans are actively encouraging this resistance. They're sharing their defensive technologies with any species that requests them. They're offering military advisors, weapon systems, and strategic consultation to anyone who feels threatened by council enforcement actions. Counselor Prime Yithka's voice carried a note of desperation. Admiral, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, honored counselors, that we negotiate with the humans before they decide to come to us. Because make no mistake, they will come to us. They are not content to simply defend their own territory. They view our entire system of government as a threat to what they call species sovereignty. The display changed one final time, showing the most recent intelligence report that had reached the council chambers. 3 days ago, a human delegation arrived at the Altair system. They offered the Altarians a mutual defense treaty, advanced manufacturing technology, and assistance in developing their own interstellar capabilities. In exchange, the Altarians agreed to formally withdraw from the Galactic Council and declare their independence from our authority. The silence that followed was absolute. The loss of even one member species would be unprecedented in Council history. Counselors, Zethka said quietly, the humans are not just resisting our authority. They are actively working to dismantle it. They believe that every species has the right to govern itself, to maintain its own military forces, and to determine its own destiny without outside interference. He paused, letting the full implications sink in. They call it liberation. And they're very good at it. Counselor Prime Yithka's tentacles had gone completely still, a sign of deep thought among his species. Admiral, he said finally, arrange a meeting with the human leadership, not as conquerors seeking surrender, but as equals seeking dialogue. The word equals seemed to stick in the ancient being's throat, but he managed to speak it. And, Admiral, the Counselor Prime added, when you meet with them, remember that we are no longer dealing with a primitive species seeking our guidance. We are dealing with the galaxy's newest major power. As Admiral Zethka left the council chambers to begin preparations for humanity's first official diplomatic contact with the galactic community, he couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. The council had sent him to Earth to demonstrate the consequences of refusing to surrender. Instead, he had provided humanity with a demonstration of something far more dangerous, the knowledge that the galaxy's greatest military power could be defeated by species willing to fight for their freedom. The humans had learned that lesson, well, and now they were teaching it to others. 6 months later, as Admiral Zethka's diplomatic vessel approached Earth's orbital defense platforms, he couldn't help but notice how much the human military presence had grown. The planet was now surrounded by defensive installations that would make any attack suicidal. More troubling still were the massive shipyards visible on the dark side of Earth's moon, where the distinctive outlines of warships were taking shape. The humans weren't just building defenses anymore. They were building a fleet. As his ship was escorted toward the diplomatic station that humans had constructed at one of their Lagrange points, Zethka received a final communication from General Chen, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces. Admiral Zethka, the human said, his weathered face appearing on the communication screen. Welcome to Earth space. I hope you'll find our hospitality more pleasant than our military resistance. The general's expression grew serious. Admiral, I want you to know that we appreciate the Council's willingness to engage in diplomatic dialogue. We've never wanted to be enemies with the galactic community. We simply refuse to surrender our right to exist as free beings. Behind the general, Zethka could see other humans working at what appeared to be strategic planning stations. Even in peace, they were preparing for war. We're looking forward to discussing a new framework for galactic governance, General Chen continued. One that respects the sovereignty of all species while maintaining peaceful coexistence. We believe such an arrangement is possible, Admiral. We hope the Council agrees. The transmission ended, leaving Zethka with a final thought that would have seemed impossible just months before. The humans weren't seeking to join the galactic community as subjects or protectorates. They were positioning themselves to lead it. And given what he'd learned about human determination, ingenuity, and military capability, Admiral Zethka wasn't entirely certain that would be a bad thing. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had always known, that freedom was worth fighting for, and that those willing to fight for it usually found a way to win. The age of human expansion was about to begin, the end.